Okay, so first of all, good evening to all of you, and welcome to High Holiday Boot Camp 2021. I'm sure you're all ready to get spiritually fit for the high holidays. So this Israeli fellow sitting at a bar on the boardwalk near the Kinneret Lake in Tiberias, in Tiberia, in the northern part of Israel. Now, this guy had a custom that at around 3 o'clock in the morning, he was already after a substantial amount of alcohol consumption. He wobbles himself out of the bar, and he's walking on the boardwalk, and he sees somewhere near the lake, near the Tiberias, the Kinneret, he sees a little commotion. He walks over. What's going on? There's this priest who's performing baptisms in the river there, in the Kinneret. So he says, Makorepo, what's going on? He's drunk. And the priest says, come here. Have you found the Savior yet? He says, no. He says, come here. He takes his head and dunks it into the water for about 2-3 seconds. The guy picks his head up. He's gasping for air. He says, no, did you find the Savior? Klum, no, nothing. So this time the priest dunks his head into the water until this guy, after 10 seconds, could barely breathe. He pulls his head out and he turns to the priest and says, are you sure you lost him over here in this part of the lake? So I share this story with you. Rosh Hashanah is coming our way. A new year, new beginning. I know all of us are looking for a fresh start, hoping for whatever negativity took place in this Hebrew year, the new year should bring in new blessings, a clean slate. And so many of us, when the high holidays come, we want to find something to lift us up. We look around to see where can we find something that will just click with me and just make me feel a little more right, a little more happy, a little more serene, a little more calm, a little more hopeful, a little more inspired. And I want to tell you a story. There was a Jew, his name was Rabbi Mendel Futterfass. He was a Hasidic Jew, born in Russia, in communist Russia. He was a Jew that really, his whole life was dedicated to helping other people. Now, after the Holocaust was over, the Second World War, Stalin, Yimach Shemo, may his name be erased, allowed any of the Polish refugees that fled to Russia, to the Soviet Union during the war, that if they wanted, they could go back to Poland. So many Jews saw this as an opportunity to be able to escape the Iron Curtain, the brutal dictatorship and suffering under Stalin. So this Rabbi Mendel Futterfass, together with a friend of his, oversaw a project of forging thousands of Polish passports for Hasidic families. They were stationed in the city of Lvov, where it was near the border of Poland, and they helped close to 10,000 Jews who were Russian citizens be able to escape Russia and through these forged passports make it to Poland, and then from Poland be able to leave, go to Israel, to France, to America. Now, they knew that the KGB were on their heels, and they realized they have just a number of nights left to finishing this whole project before they're going to be caught. Now, Rabbi Mendel, the person that he helped everyone else before he helped himself and his family. So they saw this seemed like it would be the last night, and on this train, his wife and his children would be leaving. And he figured, you know what? I think we have one more chance, one more day that we could help a few more people. And Rabbi Mendel said, I'll go the next night. His wife and his children crossed the border. But the next night, excuse me, when Rabbi Mendel was on the train, the KGB was waiting for him. They arrested him. And they gave him a punishment of 10 years of harsh labor in the gulags in Siberia. Now, thank God this Rabbi Mendel was able to survive the 10 years of Siberia. He later left Russia, was reunited with his family in England, then settled in Israel, and he was a tremendous source of inspiration to hundreds and thousands of young students who he mentored and taught. And one of the things he would do, he would share stories of experiences that he had in Siberia. Now, you got to realize, the people that were sent to Siberia weren't thugs and criminals. Anybody who had a mind in their head, a brain, was able to think for themselves, was a threat to Stalin, and they were sent there. So you had professors and doctors and lawyers and artists and poets and all types of people who were suffering there in severe situations. Now, one of the crimes that were horrible to commit in Siberia was to be caught with a deck of cards. Playing cards was considered a horrible crime. You weren't allowed to have any pastime that was enjoyable. Now, Reb Mendel kept to himself as a Hasidic Jew. He didn't really hang out with all of the non-Jews that were in his barrack, but he would observe. So one night he sees his fellow inmates sit down, they start playing cards. Suddenly they hear footsteps. The warden is coming. The cards are gone. The guy walks in. What are you doing here? You're playing cards? No, nothing. We're just sitting around. Okay. The warden leaves. The cards back out. The warden opens up. The cards are gone. He says, I know you're playing cards. I'm going to sweep through this place. Nobody is leaving until I find the cards. Now, this guy meant business. And there weren't really places to hide things. There wasn't furniture or much place to hide things. Mendel's watching what happens. Everybody has to stand at attention. And this warden begins combing through the place, looking for cards. After an hour and a half, doesn't find them. He says, I know they're here, but I don't find them. He leaves. As he leaves, the cards are back out, and they continue playing. Now, Rav Mendel is curious. So he turns to the leader of the group and says, tell me, how did you guys do it? He says, you I trust. I know you're not going to tell anyone. He says, listen, you see that guy over there? Let's call him Ivan. He was the #1 pickpocketer in Moscow. He says, when the warden comes in, we secretly hand the cards to Ivan. As the warden passes by, he slips the cards into his own pocket, into the warden's pocket. So he does a search. He looks everywhere to find the cards. The one place he doesn't look is in his own pocket, because why would there be cards in his pocket? And then right when he's about to leave, Ivan takes the cards out, and we're back. Now, Reb Mendel would turn to the students and say, listen, it's a lesson in life. In life, many times we're looking for happiness. We're looking for inspiration. We're looking for that set of cards that will just get our game right. He says the problem is we're looking everywhere else in everyone else's pockets. But the cards, the prize, the happiness, the inspiration is in our own pocket. We got to look inward. And I share this story with you because that is really the premise that I would like to lay for how we want to approach the high holidays. Rosh Hashanah is coming, the high holidays, time of inspiration. And we think, where am I going to catch that bit of inspiration? Will it be in the prayers? Will it be in the Torah reading? Will it be in the sermon? Will it be in the shofar? Somewhere out there. And friends, I'm here to tell you, there's one place where we will find it. And you know where it is? Right inside. It's in us. Within us is where we will find that miracle that we're looking for. That special ingredient that will just make things right. It's inside of us. We don't have to look anywhere else in anyone else's possessions. We already have it within us. We just have to look into our own pockets, into our own hearts, into our own minds, into our own lives. So you say, Shmuley, that sounds good, but I know myself. I know what's going on inside. I need something from outside to help me. I look at myself and I don't necessarily see it to be as Mr. Inspiration or Mrs. Inspiration. I need something from outside. What can you tell me that I have inside? So I want to study with you one of the most central prayers that we recite throughout the entire season of the high holidays, beginning on the first day of Rosh Hashanah until the end of Yom Kippur, and even in the days in between. A prayer that we recite twice every day, besides for Shabbat, specifically in the high holidays. A prayer that I think will shed a lot of light onto what is it that we have inside of us? What is that set of cards inside of us that we have in our pocket that will make all the difference? And this is the prayer known as the Avinu Malkeinu. If you don't mind, if you ever heard of the Avinu Malkeinu prayer, if you can just raise your hand so we know if people are familiar with this. Okay, I see some of you are, some of you not yet. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I want to study together with you one line. The second, in a way, it's the opening passage of the Avinu Malkeinu prayer that we recite on the high holidays. I'm going to share my screen with you. So the first line is actually not recited on Rosh Hashanah. It's the second line that is the opening prayer. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you see my screen, the text in Hebrew? Awesome, very good. So I'm going to begin this prayer with you. I'll read it in the Hebrew and I'll translate it. Avinu, our Father, Malkeinu, our King. So here we refer to God as our parent and our King. And we say, Ein lanu melech. Ein means there isn't. Lanu, for us. Melech, a king. We do not have any king. Ella ata, only you. Again, the prayer is, God, we don't have any king, only you. And my question to you is, isn't it a little bit repetitive? If we're trying to say, God, you are our king, say it directly. Avinu Malkeinu, Ata HaMelech. God, you are our king. Why say it? We don't have any other king, only you. It sounds like maybe we do have other kings, but really we only have you. What's the reason to stretch out this prayer instead of saying it directly? God, you are our king. It's a good question. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. So friends, I want to share with you an answer. And it is a very deep psychological answer. We all have kings in our own life. Each and every one of us. Let us ask ourselves for a second. What is the thing in my life that is, so to say, the king that controls me, that dictates how I behave, dictates how I live? I think for many people, we may have different answers. For some people, they could say, fear is my king. I have this fear that controls me, doesn't allow me to take risks, doesn't allow me to open up my heart, to have true love, doesn't allow me to grow. I'm afraid. Or maybe another person to say, stress. The king, the thing that is controlling my life is stress, anxiety. For others, it could be insecurity. For others, it could be an event, something that happened to them in their youth or in their older years. It could be a person in their life that seems to be controlling them. For some, it could be trauma. For others, it could be an addiction. So many of us, when we look inward and we say, what is it that sometimes makes me make certain decisions that I later regret? What is it that's causing me to do and act and behave and talk and think a certain way? Who is my king? And many times we'll come up with different answers of certain challenges that are within us that seem to be controlling us, to be our king, that don't allow us to just live life freely and really fulfill our potential. Does this resonate with anyone here, or am I the only one that's dealing with life? Okay, so I'm not the only normal one over here that knows that the life isn't so easy. Okay, good. We're all normal. Good to know. And you know what? Like I said earlier, we're looking for something to free us. We're looking for that set of cards. It's in our pocket. We say this prayer, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. But friends, we're talking to ourselves. Ein lanu melech. I don't have any king. Yes, I have all of these things that may seem like they are the king. It could be fear, anxiety, worry about where my next month, year, or future will take me. Worry about my children, worry about parents, worry about family. Is that what's controlling me? Is that truly my king? Is it trauma or an addiction? What is it? And our answer is Ein lanu melech. Those things aren't truly our king. Ella only. What is the only true entity within me that is the driving force, that is the ultimate power? Only you. And again, not you out there, but you that is in my pocket. You, God, the part of you that is within me. That spark of God known as our neshama, our soul, that is within each and every one of us. That possesses infinite powers and ability, that has an unlimited potential. Every single person has a part of God in them. That is their core, that is their essence. That is infinite, that has the ability to overcome any type of challenge, that could make it through any adversary. And we tell ourselves again and again and again throughout the holidays, Ein lanu melech, fear, you are not my king. I may deal with fear, I may have trauma, I may have anxiety, I may have stress, but you are not going to define me. That is not who I am. You are not my king. Ella ata, God, my soul, the part of you that is within me, is my only true king that has the ability to set my destiny. And that's a whole different type of prayer. That's a very different type of prayer. And now we understand why we recite this prayer again and again and again throughout the high holidays. Because the whole idea of the new opportunities and the rejuvenation of the high holidays is about finding the cards that are in our pocket. And we tell ourselves again and again, the only true power that I have, that is the ultimate say, is my infinite, godly, divine spark. That is my true king. The other things I have to deal with, but they are not who I am. They are not the ultimate control. My infinite soul that has unlimited potential is my true king. Now in Rosh Hashanah, We may wonder, but what does that mean? How do I tap into that part of me, that king? To me, it seems like I don't know the language of that king. I don't know what it sounds like. I haven't felt that part of me that has such an amazing ability, has such a resilience to be able to overcome. So friends, on Rosh Hashanah, we get to hear its voice, its sound. What is that sound? The sound of the shofar. You know, the mitzvah, the main mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is blowing the shofar, hearing the shofar. But why? Why do we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? So in fact, there are many reasons, but there are two main reasons. One reason is that it's reminiscent of ancient times when they would have the crowning of kings. When a king would be coronated, traditionally they would blow trumpets and shofars. And being that on Rosh Hashanah we crown God as our king, so we also blow the trumpets, we blow the shofar, a sign of grandeur and royalty of crowning God as our king. That's one idea. But then the Baal Shem Tov teaches another idea. And he explains this idea by a way of metaphor. He says there was a king who had a child, a son, a prince. And the king knew that one day this prince is going to have to be king. And I want him to be able to be an effective king, a compassionate king, a king with much wisdom and knowledge. If he just hangs out over here, excuse me. Sorry. If he just stays here in the royal palace, living amongst royalty, he won't be able to be a good king. He doesn't know what your average citizen goes through. So the king tells the prince, listen, I'm going to send you on a mission. I'm going to give you a sack of gold. I'm going to give you servants, a driver, a rider, and I want you to go travel through the country and get to learn what it's like, what people live like. But more importantly, I also want you to teach them about the king, about the royalty that exists over here. Illuminate their lives, share with them about the king who loves them and cares about them and wants to protect them. And that's what happens. The prince leaves the royal palace, spends time in the capital, and then travels a little further and further and further. And unfortunately, instead of the prince using his resources on the right thing, he wastes his money. His servants that he had leave him, the rider leaves him, and the prince ends up in a far-off little village, living among peasants who never heard about the king. Simple people who have no idea what's going on, have no understanding of the idea of a prince, and the prince himself with time begins to forget about who he is. He forgets the language that he grew up speaking in the royal palace. His clothing now doesn't resemble in any way a prince. His mannerism, his way of life, his appearance is that of the peasant that lives in this village. But suddenly, after years of living there, one day he reminds himself, 1 second, this is not who I am. I'm a prince. I'm royalty. I'm the son of a king. What am I doing here? I've gotten lost and distracted. I need to go back home. So he begins to start the long journey back to the royal palace. After months of getting lifts and walking, he finally comes back to the capital, to the palace, and he comes to the front gates and he tells the guards, let me in, I'm the prince. And they begin to laugh and they say, you're the 6th homeless fellow today who showed up saying that you're a prince. Have a good day. He says, no. They say, prove it. And he realizes he has no way of proving it. He doesn't speak the language. He doesn't look like the prince. He's lost everything. And as he realizes the sadness and the severity of his situation, he breaks out crying. And he's sitting there by the gates, crying his heart out. When suddenly, inside the palace, the king hears a voice. And he says, 1 second, I recognize that voice. And he comes out and says, who's crying? And they say, there's this man here who says he's your son. And the king, who's the parent, obviously recognizes the child. And he comes over to him and embraces him. And he says, I've been waiting for you. I missed you. And the son says, Dad, please forgive me. He said, nonsense. I'm so happy that you're back home. I've been waiting for you. I thought you've been lost. Come right in. And the Baal Shem Tov says that is our story. We are all princes and princesses. We all have that part of God that is within us. It began on high, and God says to the soul, what are you hanging out here in heaven? What use is it? Go out there to the countryside. Learn about life. And I want you to share with the people living in the physical world about the King who loves them and cares about them and provides for them. Teach the world about God. And we land here with a sack of gold, with so many beautiful abilities and talents, with parents that are here to help us, develop us, and teachers, and all with the goal to teach the world about our Father in heaven. But naturally, what happens many times is we lose track. For maybe it is our fault or not our fault. And that's not what we're here to discuss. But many times we forget about why it is that we are here. And we lose our language, our appearance. Our way of life isn't one that reflects our Father, the mission, and why we are here. But then Rosh Hashanah shows up and a Jew hears, oi, there's a king who's coming to town. I want to come to the synagogue. I'm ultimately a Jew. I'm a prince. I'm a princess. I want to connect with my Father. And they come to the synagogue and they open up the books and they say, I want to come in. There's a book, but it's in Hebrew. I don't even know this language. And they have a talit and I don't really relate to it. And the whole environment in the synagogue seems so foreign. And we may say, I don't belong. And then comes the sound of the shofar. The shofar is that collective cry of all of our hearts and soul. That pure sound, it's not words because it comes from a place that is deeper than words. It's the sound of our neshama, of our soul. That sound that can never be tainted. We may lose our language. We may lose our voice. We may lose our clothing, our appearance, our knowledge. But our cry, the sound of our cry we can never lose, will always remain pure and authentic. And when we call out that shofar to God, God says, my child, I've been waiting for you. Welcome back. Of course I want to give you everything you need. Of course I want to give you a good year and a sweet year. It may seem like two different ideas here. On one hand, we say that the shofar is about crowning God as the king. On the other hand, we say the shofar is the call of our soul, of our neshama. But as we saw, it's really the same thing. The shofar is us to be able to hear that sound of Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata, that soul that we have within us that is our true king. That is the only one that has the ability to control us, that gives us the ability to overcome any challenge that we may be facing within or without. That's what the shofar is, that purity. We get to hear the sound of our soul in the shofar. And at the same time, what is our shofar telling us? Crown God as your king. Crown me, your soul, the part of God within you, as your king. Realize who you truly are. You're not some damaged goods that is defected, that is defined by some type of disability or defined by some type of challenge that is emotionally bogging you down from being free. That's not who you are. You are a prince, you're royalty. There's a part of the king within you. Allow this energy, this potential to be unleashed. Overcome that which you think is holding you back. You have it within you. That is who you truly are. And that is why throughout Rosh Hashanah again and again we refer to God as Hamelach, the king. Friends, we're not talking only to a king out there. We're not talking to someone's set of cards elsewhere. We're talking to the cards in our pocket. Hamelach, God, you are the king. The part of you within me is my king. And that is really, really life-changing. It's really powerful. I want to share with you a story that I heard recently that I think can shine light on what we're sharing here. But before we do that, if does anybody have a question, if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute and ask. I guess if there's no questions, but if we're doing well and you understand, if you can give me a thumbs up. Excellent, thank you, thank you. It's been a while since we did only Zoom. It's nice to connect, thank you, excellent. So I want to share with you a story. A man by the name of Rabbi Chaim Kreisworth. This Rabbi Chaim Kreisworth was born in the early 1900s. He grew up in Poland, and with time, people came to realize that this guy was a prodigy. He was a genius. And at the young age of 15, he was already known as the Eloi of Krakow, the prodigy of Krakow. And as he grew older, he was admitted into the greatest yeshivas of his time. He was tested and ordained by the huge leaders and scholars of his days. And in his early 20s, the war broke out. And one day he's walking down the street in Krakow, and a gentleman comes over to him and says, Chaim, listen, you're a young man. He goes, I'm an old man. I don't see how I'm ever going to make it out of here. I don't think I'm going to make it out of Germany, out of Poland, out of this place. I'm not going to survive. He says, but Chaim, you're a young man, and I know you'll make it out. Do me a favor. He says, years ago, I opened a bank account, a Swiss bank account, and I've been depositing there substantial amounts of money. He says there's a fortune there that I've been putting aside because I don't believe I'll ever be able to see that money. Remember, this was the days before you could access your bank with your cell phone, and there's no credit cards. And he goes, I'm not going to make it to Switzerland, and I won't be able to get that money. He says, I want to share with you the information of my bank account, all of my information. And they knew if Chaim could memorize volumes of Talmud by heart, he could manage to remember the information. He says, I want you to take this down, remember this. And after the war, if you ever find any of my relatives that are survivors, please give this to them so that they could have this savings of mine that I've put aside. Okay, Chaim takes the information. Thank God this Chaim Kreisworth was able to make it out of Europe. First, he came to Israel, and then he was a rabbi in Chicago for some time. But in the 60s, he moved to Belgium, Antwerp. And until the end of his life, where he passed away in 2001, he served as the chief rabbi of Belgium, of Antwerp. Now, one day, this Rabbi Chaim Kreisworth is in a synagogue in Antwerp. This was probably 30 years after the war. And if you may have been in some old traditional synagogues, you have people who walk around during the synagogue collecting money for charity. People who unfortunately don't have a way to support themselves, and beggars that go around asking money, tzedakah, please, can you help me? So there was this one fellow who came into the synagogue one day, and he really looked like in bad shape. Torn clothing, a little bit disheveled. He looked like not necessarily did he have a place to call home. And he's walking around asking people for a handout for charity. And he comes over to the rabbi, and the rabbi says, here you go, here's tzedakah. He says, Shalom Aleichem, welcome. What's your name? And he tells him his name, and suddenly a light bulb goes off. He says, 1 second, I remember that name. And he realizes this person has the same last name as that fellow 30 years earlier in Krakow with a Swiss bank account, but he doesn't say anything. He says, "So how long are you going to be in Antwerp for?" He says, "I'll be here for another 2 weeks." He says, "Why don't you come back tomorrow? I want to give you a tzedakah again." The fellow comes back the next day, and Rabbi Chaim invites him to his house for breakfast. And secretly, he begins to try to do some type of, work to figure out who is this guy. Could there be a relation or not? And after a few days of speaking to this person and asking him all sorts of questions, Rabbi Chaim comes to realize that this man is not only some relative, but he's actually the child of that very man who had that bank account in Switzerland. The next day, when this fellow comes into the synagogue, Rabbi Kreiswitz says, "Come here, let me tell you something." And he says, "Listen, you don't need to be collecting for charity. You're not a poor man." He says, "What are you talking about? I'm not a poor man." He says, "You are a millionaire. You are very wealthy." He says, "I'm wealthy. I don't have a place to sleep tonight. I work, I make it day by day based on how much I raised." He says, "Let me explain to you." And he tells him the whole story about the encounter that he had with his father many years earlier. And he says, "Come, tomorrow we're going to travel to Switzerland and I'm going to help you get all that money." And indeed, that's what happened. And I share with you this story because for many of us, this may be our story. We walk around thinking that we're impoverished. We don't have what it takes to be able to live life to its fullest. We have challenges. We have shortcomings. We don't have that wealth. You look at other people. There are people you look around and you see in times of challenge, not only do they not surrender, but they seem to get this invigorated spirit and they're able to overcome anything and they're able to accomplish the greatest of things. And you say, wow, that person has a wealth of inner strength and creativity and resilience and perseverance and strength. It's amazing. I wish I had that. I'm impoverished. But friends, we all have a Swiss bank account. And it's not somewhere far away in Switzerland. It's inside of us. We are all filled with such wealth. Ein lanu melech ela ata. We have this wealth, this inner strength that is waiting to be unleashed, that is within each and every one of us, in our soul. That set of cards is in us. It's there within us. And if we would just listen to that sound of the shofar, listen to the call of our neshama saying, tap into my energy, ride my wave, you'll see you could get that much further. Then we will be able to accomplish so much more and overcome so much more challenges. I want to do an exercise with you. There's actually, on these words, there is a Hasidic tune, a melody, a tune that was composed to sing these very words. And it's a tune that was composed by the first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the author of the Tanya. He composed about 10 melodies. And he composed a song for these words. It's a very holy, spiritual, somber, and invigorating song. It's a very special song. And what I want to do is, I want to sing this song with you. And as we sing this song, I want you to close your eyes and try to identify one area in life, whether it is a relationship with a family member, a relationship with a friend, a certain goal that we want to achieve, some area in life that we feel like we're paralyzed, we're not able to accomplish that which we really want to because we feel that we have this king that is controlling us, this fear or this challenge or this trauma or this addiction that is stopping us from really getting that area of life right. And try to imagine to yourself, if I would recognize in this area of life that the true king is my soul, and this false king isn't truly in charge of me, how would I behave differently? How would I be able to live life fuller, happier, more accomplishing, more meaningful? try to identify one small area in life where if we would internalize this message, how things would be different. And the tune really, this niggin lends itself to it. This Hasidic melody, there's a opening part of the melody without words that helps us get into the meditation. And then there's the powerful tune that we sing the words, telling ourselves that we are really parts of God that are within us, that it could help us overcome everything. And then there's the tune of the melody that helps us internalize that message again without the words. So as we sing this song, you may be familiar with it. I want you to try to meditate and think on an area in your life that if you make that shift of who your true king is, how it would change your life. So here's the tune. Feel free to sing along if you know it. Ay, 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 la 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 la, ay, 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 la la la, ay, 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 Avinu Malkeinu, Ein lanu melech, Ein lanu melech, Ela ata, our Father, our King. We don't have any other kings. We don't have any other kings. Only you. Ay, 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 ayam, ayam, ayam. And this prayer, with this song, we sing twice on Rosh Hashanah and every day. And it's an opportunity for us to internalize the message, to feel it in our gut, to feel it in our heart, to feel it in our soul, to really come to realize how powerful we are. And this, my friends, leads us actually to the title of our session, which was Canceling the Culture of Cancel Culture. Because you know why? When we know who we are, then we are able to also know who others are. When we know that we are truly princes and princesses that possess that spirit of God, the true king within us, that has infinite potential and ability, then we see others, we see that within them. We don't see their shortcomings, we see their soul. And we can also cultivate and help them develop that within them. And I want to finish off by sharing with you a story that illustrates this idea. You may be familiar, Jews aren't known to be very involved and connected to the Olympics. That's not sports, and professional sports isn't known to be the Jewish thing. The old joke, they say that a Jewish boy at his bar mitzvah comes to realize that he has a better chance owning a professional sports team than being a player on a professional sports team. Just the numbers, there's more owners than players, so Olympics and professional sports isn't really the Jewish thing. However, Paralympics is very much a Jewish thing. And I want to share with you the story of Dr. Ludwig Guttmann. Ludwig Guttmann. You may be familiar with this story, but it's really a fascinating story. In fact, a number of years ago, the BBC made a whole documentary about him called The Best of Men. Now, Dr. Gutman, a German Jew, was born in 1899 to a beautiful Jewish family. He grew up immersed in a Jewish environment, the proper Jewish education. His parents instilled within him Jewish values. But he went on then he went out to university. And with time, he actually became one of the top neurologists in all of Germany. He was a very sought after neurologist. And his area of expertise was specifically dealing with people that were paraplegics, people who have experienced spinal injuries. But when the Nazis took over Germany and the Nuremberg rules were put in place, Dr. Gutman was stripped of his title, stripped of his professorship and his job because he was Jewish, and he was sent off to work in a Jewish hospital in the city of Breslau. And in fact, in 1939, on that infamous night, November 9th, if you remember, November 9th was Kristallnacht, that night when a pogrom-like night, when Jewish homes and Jewish shops were destroyed, Jews were murdered and beaten, and Jews were then deported off to concentration camps. That night, Dr. Gutman in his hospital gave the order that every single Jew who comes this way should be admitted to the hospital. And the next day, he negotiated with the Gestapo and he was able to save 60 Jews from being deported to the concentration camps. Now, Dr. Gutman in 1939 also had the opportunity to flee and escape, and he came to Great Britain, to England. There he settled in the Oxford Jewish community. He became a part of that community, an active member of that community. And his abilities as a neurologist were quickly noticed by the British government. And they actually, I think in 1944, Dr. Gutman was appointed, given the task to open the National Institution of Spinal Injury at one of the prestigious hospitals. Now, Dr. Gutman had a very different view on how to deal with paraplegics than the majority and everyone else. In those days, people who suffered a spinal injury, their treatment was that they were sedated, they were bedridden, and their life expectancy was a max of 3 months. Society, the medical world, completely wrote them off. They were people that were considered to be crippled for life, and there was no reason to keep them alive. Dr. Gutman, on the other hand, said, no way. He said, these are people that their best of years aren't behind them, but ahead of them. There's no reason that they shouldn't be able to be given hope, to be able to live and build lives and to love and to build careers and to be successful and to be happy. There's no reason for that. He began to reduce their medicines, their pain medication that they were on. And it was painful. The people began to feel their pain. And he began to encourage the patients. And he would push them to get from a lying position into sitting up. And those that were sitting up, he would get them out of bed into wheelchairs. And he saw the value of sports. And he had these patients competing in wheelchairs, doing exercise and playing with balls and different sport activities. And he told the nurses and the doctors to get into wheelchairs and to compete with them. And it was painful for these patients. And in fact, it was difficult for Dr. Ludwig Gutman because the other people in the hospital strongly disagreed with him. In that documentary, you actually have a scene where one of his fellow doctors files a complaint and says that Dr. Gutman should be relieved of his position as director. He says, these people are crippled. They don't deserve any attention. It's not worth it. You're hurting them. And in the documentary, the person turns to Dr. Goodman and says, "Who do you think these people are?" To which Dr. Goodman says, "These are the best of men." That's where the name of the documentary comes from. And with time, seeing the value in sporting activities and giving these people hope and therapy, he began competitions, local games. And then in 1960, for the first time, when there were the Olympics in Rome, there was a parallel Olympics specially for the paraplegics. And then years later, it was actually called the Paralympics. The first time in 1960, there was 156 athletes who competed. In 2020, in Tokyo, in Japan, there were over 4,500 athletes from over 160 countries who competed in the Paralympics. That's an amazing story of a person who confessed openly that it was his Jewish upbringing, the values that he received from Judaism, knowing who he is, that a person is not defined by their disabilities, by their challenges, but rather that each and every single person has that God-given ability to overcome challenges. He knew that about himself, he saw it in others, and he made it his life's mission to help them see it in themselves as well. And today, tens of thousands of people can say that they are alive and they're living a happy life, thanks to Dr. Ludwig Guttmann's vision and belief in the infinite power that every person possesses. So, dear friends, as we are approaching a new year, Rosh Hashanah is coming. Let us not look in everyone else's pockets for their cards. We don't need that. Our inspiration, our opportunities, our inspiration to growth and to overcoming challenges is going to come from within, looking inward in our own pockets. And let us internalize the message of the Avinu Malkeinu, that our true king is our soul, the infinite soul that we have. Let us hear and heed the call of the shofar that is telling us, listen to my voice, that pure, untainted voice that still has the power and the energy to help you overcome. When we turn to God as the king, don't only think of the king out there, think of God being the king within us, the infinite part of God that is within us. And friends, if we internalize this message for ourselves, we'll be able to look at our spouses, at our children, at our friends, at our colleagues, at our neighbors, and everyone who we come in contact with. We'll be able to see that king within them, that soul within them. And together we'll be able to empower each other to overcome anything and everything. And then we will be blessed with a Shana Tova Umetuka, a good year and a sweet year, filled with an unlimited amount of blessings, of health and happiness and prosperity and peace and serenity and inner peace and a sense of fulfillment and growth. And what we're really waiting for, that we should merit, that it should be a year of redemption when we'll go out of this exile, and then that will take care of all the problems. And together we will celebrate Rosh Hashanah in Jerusalem with Mashiach in the Holy Temple, and we'll hear the sound of that great shofar that we're so anxiously waiting to hear. May we merit to see it yet tonight. Amen.
Amen.
So friends, first of all, thank you very much for joining tonight. I really hope you've gained from the ideas we shared. And also, very important, I want to invite you. Next week, Monday night, Rosh Hashanah begins. Tuesday, the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Here at Chabad, all of our services are taking place outdoors in a large, beautiful tent. come to Chabad. You'll be able to hear the shofar. And if you don't want to make it during the day, at 5 p.m. at Mayflower Park, we're having shofar in the park. That's always a very special event. And then again, on Wednesday, we have services in the tent. Next week, Thursday night, we're going to have another class in preparation for Yom Kippur, same place, same time. So please, I want to encourage you, do yourself a favor. You want to hear that shofar in person, whether it's at the tent or at the park, or wherever you may end up. Go to chabadminneapolis.com, and there you'll see a banner for our holidays with all of the services. And I would love to see you in person, and all of us at Chabad would be happy to welcome you. But again, most importantly, we shall all be blessed with a good year, a sweet year, an end to all of the tzuras for ourselves, for the community, for the world, and a year of redemption. Amen.
Amen. And thank you so much, Muli.
Thank you. Thank you. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to share. I'm still here. You could unmute.
You were great tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It hit home. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you.